I want us to become brothers again like we used to be, and for us to find ourselves and bond with each other. Can we agree to that?
Opinions vary.
Welcome to the Three Brothers Filmcast. I'm Anders Bergstrom, and I'm here with my brothers.
It's Anton.
And Aaron.
My last name is the same as my brother's.
And this month, we're reviewing and digging into the biggest movie this summer, Christopher Nolan's adaptation of The Odyssey. We'll answer the questions. Does the film deliver as a telling of Homer's ancient epic? And does it deliver as a film? Once again, thanks for listening. If you haven't done so, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel as we're just a handful short of hitting 600 subscribers. And don't forget, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify is the best way to help listeners find us on these platforms. So if you haven't done so, please consider rating us there. Of course, if you like the podcast, tell your friends and family. Word of mouth can also help us grow the show. And lastly, if you haven't yet subscribed to our Substack newsletter, you're missing out on regular Three Brothers content. Each week in the newsletter, we highlight new reviews, share some relevant past writing, and offer our famous last words on film topics of the week. And you can find a link in the show description. Now, on with the show.
And here we go.
The Odyssey is one of humanity's oldest stories, dating back to the 8th century BC, and it's been a part of many cultures' storytelling traditions. I'm not going to spend a long time recapping the story as such. The very convention of calling a long journey an Odyssey originates with the story of the king of Ithaca, Odysseus, also known as Ulysses in Latin, and his long journey home after the Trojan War. Figures and imagery from the poem, from the Cyclops to the Lotus Eaters to the Sirens, are part of common cultural terminology, even if people don't know exactly where they come from. The poem and its central character have been the subject of other poems, paraphrases, and interpretations for millennia, some of which influenced Nolan's film as much as the original epic. And of course, the Odyssey has been the source for other films, including the first feature adaptation of the story, 1954's Ulysses, starring Kirk Douglas, including such loose interpretations as the Coen brothers' 2000 film, O Brother, Where Art Thou? It's a rich text with a long and varied history across time and cultures. Now, Nolan's a director who loves a big canvas and shooting with big cameras. There's no question that the Odyssey is a big story and worthy of Nolan's grand visions for cinema. Appropriately, the Odyssey is the first feature film shot entirely on IMAX. We've discussed Nolan's films before in both Roundtables and our newsletter this past week. We're all fans of his films, but nonetheless, there's always the excitement of finding out if a director has bitten off more than he or she can chew. Nolan has never made a film set prior to the late Victorian age, and that film, The Prestige, is basically a steampunk sci-fi. Dunkirk and Oppenheimer are historical films, but still concerned with Nolan's interests in technology and its impact on time and space. How would Nolan make this ancient tale his own? Aaron has written convincingly of the parallels between the Odyssey and Nolan's other works for the website already. Nolan's version of the Odyssey omits and combines some concepts from the poem, and also graphs on historical speculations, such as the idea of sea peoples associated with the collapse of the Bronze Age civilization. In my estimation, it's a fascinating, stirring, and thought-provoking mix of modernist concerns with ancient storytelling. I was both thrilled and moved by the film and the performances, which we'll get into more detail shortly.
Okay, Ramblers, let's get rambling.
I saw the film with my family and friends in a packed theater in IMAX laser projection format. The audience was rapt. My film-going companions were as thrilled by the film as I was. It was certainly a hit with the audience. So let's get into more of what you guys thought. Aaron, I've gotten a bit of your take on the film from your essay on the site. So let's start with you, Anton. Anton, in what format did you see The Odyssey, and what's your initial takeaway?
In most respects, this is exactly the adaptation of The Odyssey I expected Christopher Nolan to make, because it's such a Christopher Nolan movie. But Absolutely. In my books, that's a good thing. I saw it on Laser Ultra, which in Canada, Landmark Cinemas, that's one of their premium formats, but it's not an IMAX, but it's sort of a larger screen, really sharp, crisp. The movie's so large, so it was great to see it on that screen. I want to see it on IMAX still. I'll definitely go see it again because I liked it a lot. But it's also such a large movie with such scale, such significant and deep themes, tackling a foundational work of Western civilization that sort of like after Oppenheimer, I'm I'm also still mulling it all over. And I don't think after one viewing I can have my definite reaction. But in short, I really liked it. I think it's a solid film. I think it's a good adaptation. It is different from the poem, but I think it modernizes and updates in significant ways that speak to our moment. So I think it's also a significant movie. Is it among Nolan's best? I don't know yet. I don't know. So I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to know. He's made so many great films. Aaron, what about you? We got a sense of what you think from your writing already, but what are your sort of initial thoughts?
I really liked it, which is not a surprise. And I think it is perhaps cliche to say, but at this point, Christopher Nolan, alongside a James Cameron or a Denis Villeneuve, is one of the most trustworthy spectacle filmmakers that we have, as in it's very rare these days to go to a movie, even movies I like, such as Disclosure Day, which we talked about in the last episode, made by a master like Spielberg, but it's not that common where I go and I'm just almost immediately completely swept up in the movie, in the world, and I have a bit, even though this is a very dour story, have a bit of that childhood aspect of being like, wow, that's just really cool. Like, it's just really fun to live in this world for 3 hours. And it's a fairly fantastical world. I think in a lot of my writing and a lot of the discourse around the movie, there's a lot of discussion of the themes about war, about guilt, trauma, about the modernist themes that are put onto the film, which we're going to talk about, obviously. But I also think it's sometimes, in some of the criticism I've seen, it's understated just how bold some of these aspects of this film are in terms of treating the ancient myth on face value, the fact that it incorporates things like the Cyclops and the Siren and Charybdis and Scylla and the Lotus Eaters and Lastrygonians and all these weird fantastical elements, and it presents them in that kind of grounded, realistic, credible Nolan cinematic style, right, where there's a lot of practical effects so that you believe what is happening on the screen. I know I've seen a bit of the behind the scenes work of the Cyclops and how they used puppetry and they used real in-camera trickery to have Bill Irwin as the Cyclops, so he's like him controlling a puppet in moments, and then moments it's just camera trickery of him actually just being like angles is much larger than them, and then other points it's CGI, and how it all blends together and it comes really credible. But it's just some really strange stuff in this movie, which even in the trailers, I was a little bit worried that some of these elements wouldn't work, because it works wonderfully in a poem, in a fantastical poem like Homer's, but seeing it on the screen, and if it's not in that kind of old sword and sandal, goofy Sinbad in the Seven Seas way.
Yeah, Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah, Jason the Argonauts, Ray Harryhausen. You're like, is it going to be corny? And it wasn't corny. It's actually really credible. And maybe the thing I would want to end saying here is that I was the one element that I think is very new for Nolan in terms of tone and cinematic spectacle, for lack of a better word. And maybe this is carrying out a bit of his tonal approach in Oppenheimer, but this movie has more than a few elements of horror to it, which is not something that's in most of his movies. Like, I can't think of another scene in any of his movies like the Cersei sequence where she is transforming the men into pigs. It's body horror. He's just straight up doing body horror. And it's like, oh, Nolan's actually he's not just making the same movie again, even though you could say that Inception is an Odyssey movie and Interstellar is an Odyssey movie. But he's actually bringing in new elements and kind of stretching his skills, not just in terms of scale.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think Nolan he's good at knowing how to bring in elements of other genres in order to kind of defamiliarize whatever he's working with. And I was rewatching Batman Begins the other night. And I recalled, because you say, he's never made that sort of body horror. He's tapped into scary movie sort of stuff. The portrayal of what the first time we see Batman in Batman Begins is this thing in the shadows that jumps out. And it's almost like Batman's, Alien in the movie Alien, where it's like, it's like the guy's in the warehouse and all of a sudden a guy just is pulled away and stuff like that. But I think you're right that the Circe is sort of, it's a new aspect of sort of horror, that sort of body horror, tactile, that he's sort of bringing in. And I think it's successful here. And I also think that I'm kind of surprised by some of takes where some people are like, oh, it's sort of a demythologized version. And you're like, well, like the gods are sort of done in a slightly ambiguous way, the way that some portrayals of, say, like even biblical stories have done. Whereas, is this person seeing an angel? Are they seeing a god? Is it just in the character's head? It leaves that ambiguity, but at the same time, we get the Cyclops, and that's definitely there. We get those other giants. That's definitely there. Like, so he includes elements of it, but you're like, what did people expect from Christopher Nolan? Like, remember his approach to Batman was like, I'm going to take a superhero, and the way I'm going to tell this story differently is by trying to ground it in as real a world as possible. And like, so to me, I went into this movie with that expectation. In some ways, this movie is more fantastical than I thought it might even be. Anders, your overall take?
Yeah, no, I really liked the film. Like, I was honestly a bit, trailers are always...
You can't trust them nowadays because they're too well made. The trailer can be slick, it can be annoying.
And ultimately, honestly, the film exceeded my expectations of the trailer. So to me, that's like a huge thing. And as you say, it's very much, this is Nolan as auteur. He's taking the oldest of stories practically, like maybe that you could, and saying, this is how I would tell it. This is Nolan's Odyssey, right? It's not Homer's Odyssey. It's Nolan's Odyssey. But I love that. Like, I love that he's taking an existing story. It's not something he came up with or his brother, and he's telling it the way he would tell it. And to me, that, like, it works really well. Like, all the things you said are great. His sort of eschewing of like, sort of the CGI sludge of modern movies, I appreciate. Some people might say, I think there's a few who have pointed and saying, oh, it's a little bit sometimes like sparse or whatever. But I'm like, I kind of love those shots of like beaches and like open space, and the ocean looks so foreboding, the wine dark sea of Homer, right? As they say. And like the fact that like, I'm sure we'll get into it more, but like that Circe scene, like I saw a thing the other day, like I had no idea that was like done with zero CGI. It's like physical, like, like effects that like Samantha Morton's like molding some sort of like prosthetic thing so that like, and it works so well. Like, it's not to like fetishize like non-digital effects, but it's just saying like Nolan wants to ground you in a certain way. And he's not like avoiding like any supernatural things, as clearly they're in the films. It's just like, though the filmmaking to me is, rooted in this idea of like entering you into a world. So, and on that level, I loved it. I'll be honest, I'm probably not as like, I read the Odyssey years ago in like the Penguin translation I had at the time. Like, I've read it. There's a comic adaptation I've read in the recent years that I think, Anton, you gave my boys. That was quite good. I understand, like, is it 100% exact? No, but like, I think that's like a wrong way to approach the question of adaptation, right? Like, but to me, the Odyssey also is a story like I mentioned in my intro, like something like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But you also have like this is a story that has been so adaptable and so like mutable. Like you, like literally James Joyce, Ulysses, right? Is like, yeah, it's Dublin in like the early 20th century, but it's the Odyssey, right? And you can take these elements and like shift them. So the idea that, Nolan, and this is where I think Aaron, in some of your writing, you're spot on. Like the idea that Nolan needed to do Robert Eggers and make it like interest into the world of like, the mindset. I think that's wrong. A wrong approach.
I would say you could do that, but he chose not to. I wouldn't expect Nolan to do that.
Because it's Nolan. Anyway, yeah. So I like this movie a lot. Actually, I liked it more than I thought I would. I think it's easily the best film I've seen this year. I can't wait to see it again. I want to seek it out, and like I saw it in the IMAX laser. Now I want to see it in the 70 millimeter to get the like full thing. Like my boys are like loving it. Every kid and like, well, not kid, but like teenagers and other people I've met, like this is the film of the summer, man. Aaron, you've read the Odyssey most recently, I think, of all of us. Like, what is your thought of this as an adaptation of this poem, which, to be clear, yeah, we say 8th century recorded, but like is probably the accumulation of like centuries of oral tradition. Like what's your thought?
Well, and also a thing that Nolan brings in to the movie, which the Bronze Age claps. People always refer to Homer as a Bronze Age poet. He's not. He's post-Bronze Age. And this is the thing, like, people don't understand. He's not Mycenaean because that civilization had collapsed by the time that
he's telling stories of his ancient past.
Exactly. This is ancient history to Homer. And that's some of the fascination stuff. But yeah, so I recently read the Odyssey for the first time. I read the Fagles translation for Iliad. I read the Iliad first and then read Odyssey after. And both, very fascinating works, very different in certain ways. Obviously, you can see that there's clearly similar influences on both, but I can kind of understand why some people quibble as to whether the same person actually wrote both of them. But they do talk to each other a lot in terms of the poem. Be that as may. I was a little bit shocked by some of the objections to Nolan's adaptation. And it's kind of twofold. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of critiquing the critics on this. I'd rather more talk about the movie and what Nolan's actually doing. But it kind of stems down to, one, this idea of people quibbling with adaptation choices, which is something that every adaptation has to make, as in you cannot make it the totality of the poem or else you just read the poem. You have to pull out the elements of the character and of the story as presented in the poem that can kind of be translated by Nolan into a cinematic narrative that is coherent and consistent within its own presentation. And so elements of it change. So the Odysseus of Nolan's film is not nearly the complicated trickster of Homer. He does not delight in his disguises. He is not as ambivalent or ambiguous in terms of his relationship towards good and bad deeds. He's a little bit more of a traditional hero, a little bit more of a leader of men, more of a man, a king. He's honestly more of a king than the figure presented in the poem. In the poem, Odysseus is somewhat almost of a shapeshifter, and he shifts to each situation as what is required of him to not only root out the truth of the matter, but also get what he wants out of it. And he's not Agamemnon, who is the strongest, and he's not the most powerful. He's not Achilles, the greatest fighter. He is the smartest. And so his way of out of every situation is that he's the the most cunning. And even though in the first line of the Fagles translation, it's the sing of me, O muse, the man of twists and turns. It's not a phrase that actually is a one-to-one of the translation of the original Greek word, which kind of is a more complicated
Emily Wilson does. The Emily Wilson opening line is, sing me a song of a complicated man.
Well, it's tell me the story of a complicated man, because it's not even sing in the original. But what I'm saying is I like that phrase twists and turns because it really captures that idea of he completely shifts his position as a character dependent on the scenario because he's absolutely opportunistic at every moment.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's immoral or amoral. He has a clear morality, but he's not always living up to it. And that's the thing that I think Nolan understands, that even though Odysseus is somewhat of a trickster character, and that, later writers commenting on the figure such as Dante put him in actually a pretty high level of hell because he's with the liars and deceivers. He's there because of destroying Troy. Exactly. And he is considered much worse than an Achilles in Dante's cosmology because of the line, and because of Troy is considered this kind of golden city of the past within Dante's imagining of the ancient world.
The connection between Troy and Rome. And
exactly, because
remember, it's all because of
remember Dante never actually read Iliad or Odyssey. He just read the Aeneid. Yeah. But so Nolan pulls out these threads, and the thing is, because I'd read it so recently, I did not feel like the Matt Damon Odysseus is unfamiliar to the Homer character. I just think he's certain aspects heightened and others quieted. So you don't get the humorous aspects of the character, But this idea that the Odysseus of Homer is not motivated by guilt at all is absolutely foolish. At multiple points, he breaks down in tears about the idea of like things he's done or mistakes he's made, or the fact that he can't be back for his wife and son and can't be caring for his kingdom. As well, this is the bigger element, and it's not even a character thing, but it involves the character. And I think Nolan is absolutely spot on in understanding the centrality of the law of the gods, and specifically Zeus's law, as being the entire animating lesson or moral of this story. The Odyssey is specifically about a man who's trying to get home but can't because he broke all the rules and the gods are punishing him for it. And I don't understand this idea. It's like, well, no, it's a rousing adventure about this kind of amoral figure who's just kind of lying and cheating and sleeping his way back home. And it's like, no, so I listened to a recent interview where Emily Wilson's even commenting on the Nolan film, and she thinks it's a very flat, and she said it's Jason Bourne as an ancient hero, essentially. And
it's a bad reading of the Bourne idea.
I understand that classicists and basically people who are very close to works are very precious about adaptations in cinema specifically. Even if they can appreciate aspects of the movies they watch, they're always nitpickers. But I think that's such a like misguided comment, because this idea that because the character is mournful or has moral dimensions that are more similar to Christian morals and modern morals, that somehow that is a lesser than the more alien morality of the past. It's like this idea that somehow ancient morality is actually a higher morality than ours because it's somewhat incomprehensible to us, and thus that's automatically more interesting. And it's like, no, it's just different than ours. Because Nolan's morality and that he's exploring in the film is more familiar to our world right now does not mean that the character is automatically less interesting or less complicated. It just means he's more like us than he is like a man of the past.
I like your description of Nolan's version of Odysseus being sort of the levels of the character have been modulated in different ways. In that it's not a flattening, right? We do get different aspects of the character, but certain aspects like the guilt side is emphasized, right? Stretched out longer, where the humor comes in shorter moments. But interesting, I didn't listen to the interview with Emily Wilson, but her comment to Jason Bourne. Now, here's an interesting thing I'd say is that, okay, well, what is Jason Bourne? What is he known for most of all? And then Matt Damon, again, used this aspect in The Martian, competence. What is Odysseus known for? Competence. Like, this is one of the things of like, when the Greeks are like, we need someone to do the job of like, how are we going to get in here? Who do they turn to? It's Odysseus. They know he's going to figure out this problem. And so I actually think the casting of Damon on that aspect like works, because we just trust, like at the beginning when we're learning that, no one could stretch a bow this way, but he can do it. Like, Damon's able to sort of sell that, I think, to our audiences as being, he's not superhuman, not in a way that, Brad Pitt I thought was well cast as Achilles in Troy, where like he feels like a human, but like someone who gets the job done and is very capable. So I think that whole aspect of Odysseus is sort of emphasized. But I also agree that, I think in an adaptation, like, okay, we can all haggle over whether an adaptation is faithful or not, or successful or not. And that's fair game. The weird thing is that you're expecting that some people seem to be suggesting that you should make it like straight out, and that's how you have to approach it. I mean, the story's already been told and retold like thousands of times, including already in other classical works like the Aeneid, which give their own version of the fall of Troy at the start and come up with their own sort of versions.
But flipping it around, right? Because the Aeneid is the Roman version where they see themselves as descended from the Trojans. So they're actually more critical of the Greeks.
Exactly. And in that sense, I actually think that people are underestimating Nolan's awareness of the Aeneid, and essentially characters like Sinon who show up in that, and how he brings that in, because he's engaging a lot. Aaron, you mentioned in your essay, also Tennyson's poem Ulysses with the ending. Like, he's making decisions, and it might be the decisions that rankle someone who wants a movie that's all about how would you portray sort of as best as we can, a version of the Bronze Age, while at the same time somehow being faithful to like the mythical aspect. I mean, that's one of the weird criticisms is like, we want this to be historically accurate. Okay, so there's no gods and there's no Cyclops. No. I mean, like, I just want it to look and feel like an actual historical work, but I also want all the fantasy stuff and like Mount Olympus. Like, I just don't understand some of the criticisms.
My final comment I'll make, just it really is on the criticisms of the character. So a key sequence of the poem that is not in the movie is the whole stuff with Princess Nausicaa and the Phaeacians, right? He ends up on this island of the Phaeacians. He's, he endears himself to them. They laud him. They don't know he's Odysseus. And then they tell this wonderful story, sing the song of Odysseus. And then he like essentially reveals himself by having the stories of himself told back to him, and then he fills in extra gaps to the rest of them and like regales and then tells his story. So there's a bunch of nesting narratives within the poem. But the central moment within that sequence that reveals Odysseus and essentially he becomes naked to them is when he starts crying over the hearing about what happened to his men. As in, the foundational element that reveals Odysseus to these people who end up bringing him home to Ithaca is his revelation of guilt.
Wow.
And so I don't understand
That's a good find.
people who claim to really understand the poem are extremely critical of this portrayal of Odysseus, a man motivated by guilt. And it's like, again, it's present in the poem. Is it the dominant present element? No. But it's present, and Nolan is just modulating elements of the character to serve his own thematic interests.
And this is, to me, was actually cool about the film is like, this is Nolan as auteur. Like, in the idea of the auteur is like a filmmaker who can take any material and like kind of like, that it's their take on it, right? And to me,
but it's not redundant.
Not redundant. But I'm just saying, like, what would Christopher Nolan do with this story? What elements would he accentuate? What are his, like, preoccupations? How does this tie into his other films? Aaron, I think you did a really good job of pointing out all the connections to other films, like, of Nolan's, right? And to me, like that doesn't lessen the film. That actually makes it more interesting. It's like it's in conversation not only with the ancients, but it's also in conversation with his own body of work.
I would say, so I'm in the midst of rereading the Odyssey. I read it, the Fagles translation, about 2 decades ago. I took some courses on, Greek epics, or I guess classical epics, because we also did the Roman ones. But so like I know it. I'm not an expert, but I know this stuff. And I'm rereading the much lauded now Emily Wilson translation. I think I like Fagles better, but that's beside the point. Hers actually, on a side note, it's very modernized, right, in the language and stuff. And a lot of people have been like, "Oh, should you say like mom and dad?" I was like, this is very much, I don't know if Nolan has mentioned which translations he's recently read. Okay.
He specifically mentions the Wilson one.
Yes. Well, I think he's drawing on this idea of like, how do I make it seem like this is people talking today? Like, the immediacy of it. And I think that's why he did that. He doesn't want it to be a distant sort of, this feels like old timey, heightened.
He doesn't want it to be like one of those like Shakespeare adaptations that like distance people. Yeah.
And you might disagree and say, I want a distanced, heightened one, but he's made the choice, and I think it's fair.
But he's made lots of comments about how he specifically avoided British accents and some of the pageantry because he did not want people thinking that this existed within that theatrical cinematic world of Cleopatra and Ben-Hur and stuff. Like, he's like, I want to avoid all that. I don't want people to have this idea that this is somehow stuck in a world of the past where it's people playing costumes. He's like, I want it to feel like it's an immediacy where even though there's fantastical things within this world, people comprehend that these are real human beings that they could have met.
Yeah. And so I think it's great. Then he's clearly thinking through this, and you can disagree, but this isn't like a dumb adaptation. And anyone who suggests it's just like doesn't get it, I think that's a bad take. But I would also say in rereading, as soon as I started reading book 1, I was like, oh, I see why Nolan wanted to adapt the Odyssey and not the Iliad.
Yep.
Because the Odyssey is not told straightforward.
Though he almost did adapt the Iliad. Because he almost
Apparently
directed
he
Troy.
was the original director of Troy, right?
That would be another conversation about what he would have done with that. Because again, Nolan cannot tell.
He admits he wasn't ready.
No, but Nolan cannot tell okay, Homer always starts in medias res midway through, but like Nolan will do that too, or start at the end and circle back. But Nolan cannot tell a straightforward story. He doesn't want to. It's against sort of his filmmaking project.
Oppenheimer is like, yeah.
No, they're always, it's excessive, or maybe not excessive. That's the wrong word. He loves intercutting, and it will, narratives will circle back. Like, this is the guy who said, I'm going to tell a Batman origin story. But again, we'll never start at the beginning and work our way through. We're going to start midway through, and then we're going to explain how he got there on like 3 levels of intercutting. and then we're going to get to the regular story in Gotham City. But like, I could see in the early books of the Odyssey, right? If you haven't read it, the son is like, where's my dad? I got to figure out where he is. And he's going to go around and ask people about where his dad is. And then people are going to tell their version of, this is what I know about your dad. And if this already sounds like how many different Nolan movies, like, I think we're starting to understand what aspects of what he's drawn to here.
Well, literally, isn't the first 4 books called the Telemachy? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just about
like
Telemachus.
They're separate. It's Telemachus' story. Yeah.
And then, people are we surprised that we have a male protagonist who's dealing with trauma? Can someone point out a Nolan movie that doesn't have that?
People in the ancient past didn't experience trauma, so don't worry.
No, but actually, Anton, I was so struck by, in the terms of the guilt and the trauma male narrative. So, like, the Nolanisms, the moments that like screamed at me almost so Nolan is any of the sequences of him on the beach with Calypso.
Oh, man.
Like, this is just limbo. It is limbo. He is in
Yes.
limbo in Inception, and the lotus eating is forgetting that he's dreaming and stuff. And I'm just like,
have we not seen the opening of? Now we have to read the opening of Inception as being like moment.
An Odyssey.
Yeah, it's an Odyssey. And I actually am surprised that actual explicit connection of like washing up on the shore and forgetting and stuff is not something I had clearly thought of before. But now you start to see it, like it's there.
We were young men together. I'm an old man, filled with regret.
It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like this movie, it's less that he's like bending the Odyssey to all his own things. It's like rather that you can see like the influences of like ancient literature and stuff on his own work.
And it's an uncovering, right? Like, what parts are you going to shine your light on? What are you going to uncover and focus in on? That has to be every film. But
yeah, is Nolan's career not an odyssey to realizing that this is one of the central influences on his own work? And I think he's spoken a bit about that in interviews where he's like, I've always really appreciated these ones, but not until starting to make this, I didn't quite realize the kind of subconscious effect it had had on me on so many of my films, that it's like, oh, I've maybe found my way home in some sense into the type of story I need to tell.
So one of the aspects of if we want to bridge sort of into discussing Nolan, his movies are often, his characters partly related to sort of the trauma dimension, but there's often an origin point that there's a moment that affects everything after, like these pivot moments, right? The way that not Inception, but the way that Interstellar keeps going back to the moment in the library in his house, and it's like the moment of like, I'm going to have to leave, and like all that sort of stuff. That each of his movies, or most of his movies, have like a moment like that, becomes like, everything bends from that afterwards. And it makes a lot of sense, that he would do Batman when you look at it that way. Because Batman is so fixated.
Is the moment, right? Like,
yeah. Batman's so fixated on that origin moment. But again, and what's interesting here then is I think it's present there in the original, but he really emphasizes it as being like, okay, and then in this, it's the fall of Troy, it's the horse. And that's going to be the thing that sort of everything pivots around.
And specifically the horse as a kind of violation of Zeus's law.
Maybe one last thing about sort of adaptation. I've seen more than a few comments of people just hating the fact that we get this sort of codified version of Zeus's law, in the sense of characters repeat that phrase. And I understand that in Homer, no one's ever like, Zeus's law. But early on, even if you're reading like the first couple books, there are many times where a character mentions, but Zeus demands that we do this, towards the stranger and show hospitality. And I find it bizarre that you're like, hospitality to a guest is such a key thing of all Greek literature. It's in a lot of the tragedies, it's one of the things that makes the actions horrific is that people violate that. I think what people don't get is like for a movie with an audience that will probably, you have to assume that these people haven't read the Greek tragedies and haven't read the Odyssey. So how do you do that in a way that they'll remember? And I think we all recognize that Nolan can be a blunt filmmaker at times because Nolan wants to be both complicated and yet accessible. Mm-hmm. And so he often chooses the complication to be how he tells the story. And if he's going to tell a story in a complicated way, with all these sort of flashbacks, the story he's telling might
be very basic.
Yeah, and then often the themes will be repeated and pronounced. And like to me, you're like, I understand why he does that, even if you don't like it. It's because he's not trying to alienate his audience.
I've heard a few people like also comment on like this like emphasis on Zeus's law and like comparing it to sort of the modernization or Christianization of the story.
First Christianization, and then probably modernization of
and
how we understand why you treat other people.
Exactly. And I'm like, well, to me, like I was struck by like something that I hadn't really like, honestly, like I hadn't thought about a lot, but like how similar that interpretation of Zeus's law is to the sort of, invocations of hospitality in early Christian culture.
You don't know if you'll be
that
inviting.
You don't know if it's an angel in disguise, right?
And that just sounds very similar.
And it's not, so it's like the same way as Zeus's law is that you don't know if you're entertaining a god in disguise, right? So to me, that's like, it's a very interesting thing. And then like to apply it to our own world, it raises complicated questions, right? Like it's not like as simplistic or as some people want to make it to be one way or the other. It's an interesting moral question.
Yeah, and Odysseus's breaking of Zeus's law is the cause of his misfortunes. It is the reason all his men die. It's the reason it takes him so long to get home. In the original poem, the Trojan horse is not so much that specific thing because it is spurred on by Athena and the other God and Zeus, right? Like it's how they manufacture the fall of Troy by helping Odysseus
to end the standstill.
To end the standstill, the infinite war. They are gonna like, this needs to end because otherwise they will just be
10 years sitting on the beach. Yeah,
exactly. In the poem, though, the key breaking of the law is his sequence with Polyphemus or Phoebus, the Cyclops.
Yeah, Polyphemus. Yeah,
he enters his home. He eats his food and he brings no gifts.
Cheese. I wonder how good that cheese is.
and then the Cyclops treats him. It's almost like the reverse where it's like, well, what if your host is actually a god and you don't realize it? And he's a demigod, right? He's the son of Poseidon. And then Poseidon curses him. And that's where you get all this misfortune on the seas. And then, it's not in the movie, but in the book, you get the Lastrygonians, the island of the giants. And in the movie, it's kind of a very bizarre sequence of these giant creature men.
The intense armor.
Absolutely destroying all of his men and the woods shifting around them as like these traps that seems like they can shift the landscape to actually hunt the people almost. It's like it's taking, the whole concept of Odysseus and how he thinks that a hunt is actually just a battle, but it's he has this whole.
So he plucks the bow, right?
He plucks
What's the
bow
difference
wants
between
it to be
a
fair.
battle and a hunt? Yeah,
exactly. But it's the opposite of that. It's like, well, what if that brutality that people say is a normal thing that Odysseus does not himself do, but others do, is actually directed now towards men? The Lastrygonians are treating Odysseus' crew like a man hunting a fox or something, or a deer, with no fairness here, just complete brutal hunting and killing. But in the book, there's the princess, and she takes some of the men back to the castle, and then the castle, the king eats the men, and it's this whole completely
it's cannibal.
Those people don't no longer follow the laws. That's why they're like these horrifying outer land people, is that they don't follow any of the God's laws, and strangers come asking for food and they turn them into food. Like it's
and I think his version of the Lestrygonians. I don't think I'm going to say it ever right.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah.
But
His version of that sequence also then plays as sort of a carnivalesque like mirror version of how anyone on the beaches that they've raided would view them. These guys show up in armor and, you know, go in and just sort of slaughter them and take their stuff. And here we get then, you know, sort of the smaller guys go onto the beach, and then there's these giants who do the same to sort of them. And I feel like there's an aspect where we're supposed to see this as like, you know, to other people, this is how they appear. These sort of formidable, sort of scary, strange, you know, giants in armor who just come in and like slaughter you.
Well, and you get the sequence with his second in command, played by Hamish Patel, where he's like, "Why did you run? Why did you run when we showed up in your village?" And in the background, they're burning the village. And the man just makes his comments like, "Well, the people from the sea are coming." And he doesn't connect that. It's like, he means that like, you people come and burn our stuff. And of course I flee when, when that happens. And then obviously Odysseus makes that connection. To jump forward, but I just popped up into my head here, but just back to the whole notion of kind of trauma, but also the Christian morality that I think Nolan has never spoken about religious morals or anything, but I think he's an extremely moral filmmaker. You get that hugely in the Batman movies, but you get it in other films, that he has this very clear moral sense that he wants to not only impart a lesson to the audience, but he also like holds his characters to this very clear standard.
So maybe regardless of what his personal beliefs are,
as an artist, yeah,
I would say that, you know, clearly themes like guilt and sacrifice, which are central to Christian philosophy and theology, seem very central in his works.
Yeah, and the sequence that I did not realize this until reading actually a very good review of the movie in Mockingbird. I forget the author of the review, and who pointed out something that's extremely obvious, but did not click because it's presented in this ancient world. When Odysseus finally makes it home to Ithaca, and he's finally speaking to Penelope as the stranger, and he's telling her of Troy, it is through a wooden slat in which he is giving confession. She is literally dressed almost like a priest, and he is the man coming to confess, literally through the wood, hiding his face in shame. And I'm like, this is so, he's the symbols of ritual. He is using Christian understandings of it to help us understand ancient religious. I'm like, man, this is really thought through. This is really good.
If we're talking about Nolan as an auteur, to me, like, he is like Hitchcock.
Yes.
In that way, he like delivers his sort of British, like, I don't think he's Catholic, but like that kind of like, you know, understanding of morality and things. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think I texted you guys after I saw the movie where I was like, guys, like after Hitchcock, like Nolan has to be the auteur who just keeps remaking the same movie again and again. Yeah. And I'm not saying that as an insult. It's actually just you can see how they like shape any story into like these threads that they keep playing with and developing then over the course of multiple films.
And that's to me what the auteur does, right? Like it's like, it's not about like having your own like stories. It's about how you interpret each story and how you make it your own through the work of cinema.
And don't you feel like Nolan is kind of, so, you know, in terms of the structure that he keeps coming back to, this kind of temporal unraveling, it's like he uncoils a narrative and then he recoils it right at the end. So he'll spool things out, it gets loose, and then it's like once you understand it, it like closes in on the theme and this character in it. But it works best, I think, when his pacing is really in alignment for the viewer and the character, where the realization is coming simultaneous for both, and so that we feel it, you know, that's when like the sympathetic, we're in the head of the character, we're understanding their emotional conundrum, helps us understand then the greater themes of the movie. And it's why Oppenheimer is such a key one, because I think it's he does that in multiple ways throughout that movie, of kind of uncoiling and then springing this almost emotional trap on the audience and then on the characters. He does it in one sense for Strauss, the Robert Downey Jr. character, when he understands the actual reality of what's going to happen during this hearing, and he starts to realize that like he himself is the villain in this whole scenario. But then on the greater scale, it's when, you know, it's Oppenheimer coming to comprehend truly that the bomb was a sin that he will never atone for. That like he should have never made it, and that's why you get the haunting ending of like, you know, he thought he would end the world. Well, he said he already did.
Yeah,
that's the final line.
The Nolan-esque like sort of like final like tying up the thread from the beginning with Einstein.
And so if Anton, you're talking about how Nolan he identifies a central moment in his movies, and then that moment is a kind of almost apocalyptic moment in the true sense of revelation, right? It punctures the realities and it becomes this thing that you kind of loop back to. So it's Batman's parents being killed with
the
Lenny.
Catastrophe.
Yeah, it's the catastrophe.
Lenny in the story of like Sammy Jenkins.
Yes, exactly. It's the Sammy Jenkins raped and killed my wife in Memento, right?
Even Insomnia opens during the credits with the image that is like the event.
Yeah, faking the evidence for the murder case. Interstellar, it's telling his daughter that he's never going to see her again. In Dunkirk, it's actually it's almost like that element happens off screen. It's already Dunkirk is almost the most experimental of his films because it's so minimalist to the point it strips away almost all character and all like narrative. It's very, I love it. I love that, but it's got a purity of it, right? But so Nolan identifies this kind of apocalyptic event, but he also uses that as the means of moral understanding for the characters. But then he uses his temporal structure to mete out more of that event over the course of the film so that our understanding of it grows. And I think this movie and Oppenheimer do such good jobs of that on a structural level. The fact that we see Troy 3 times and each time it expands more and each time it expands more until it finally gets, it's like we're seeing one angle and then we're seeing another angle. And now we see the full picture. And once the character comprehends that full picture, we do too. And it kind of crystallizes into this full revelatory understanding of the moral implication of why that event has constructed everything, and that's why that's always the climax of the film, right? Of all
and
of
it's
his
the
movies.
moment, and I
It's the
think
epiphany,
and it's the moment that also, like, for the audience, like what makes Nolan such a successful director, I think, is because those moments work for his audiences.
Yeah, exactly.
That in that moment, we start, like, you know, I felt it in this movie when Odysseus starts to be like, you know, this is why I actually like have not been able to go back or couldn't go back. And then we start to understand, oh, this is what he's saying about
we're the people from the sea.
Exactly.
We broke that law.
They're the one
bringing that horse.
Their decision that's going to end the Bronze Age.
And then that also speaks, I think, in this movie for us
to modernity.
Yeah.
You know,
like I think Nolan's also talking about our society, right? Like,
absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
He's saying that we
AI.
are also. Yeah,
he's talked so much about AI with Trojan Horse. It's the bomb. It's the atom bomb. It's
It's why it's
modern warfare.
This is the partner film to Oppenheimer in that way.
And there's seeds of it. I don't know if you remember, but in Batman Begins, because I recently rewatched it, we get these strange, they seem strange in the film, these moments where the League of Shadows is discussing their role in human history.
The League of Shadows has been a check against human corruption for thousands of years. We sacked Rome, loaded trade ships with plague rats, burned London to the ground. Every time a civilization reaches the pinnacle of its decadence, we return to restore the balance.
Nolan's very preoccupied with sort of both personal, like, trauma and how we deal with memory in our past and guilt, and then on a social level, sort of decline narratives and how does the civilization die, and then also sort of the origins of them, because you know it's very interesting. You're like, you know, because as you, Aaron, wrote, but many people have remarked, you know, the atom bomb in the end of World War II gives birth to whatever age we're in, which might be ending, you know? And then, so it's brilliant. Then he goes back to such a work that begins also sort of everything that we consider sort of Western civilization sort of goes back to Troy and the story about
Bronze Age.
Yeah, and the ends of the Bronze Age. And he's interested in this, even in Batman Begins, this idea of like the cycles of a society, of a culture. And it gets always linked also, though, to individual morality. That like people's individual choices actually affect the social.
I will say, like, I don't want to get like super political and things, but like I think Nolan has a not like conservative and like like a sort of like political sense, but like in a like the idea, like, as you said, that like individual morality and these kind of things are also linked to larger things. This is why I think it's so funny that both like so many people.
He believes in the individual clearly.
Yes. So many people like misunderstand his work across the political spectrum because he doesn't fit into our current sort of weird arrangement of politics, but he is like someone who's like fits into like a serious like thinking about like, you know, how human beings like deal with these things.
What did you guys think about some of the interesting moments that I'm trying to think about what the movie's saying about them? But right at times Odysseus speaks like a, you know, Enlightenment liberal. And I think, you know, it's really interesting how we're like supposed to take some of those moments. There's the point where he's like, you know, the gods help those who help themselves.
Yeah.
But then we get that interesting fact that in the movie also asserts that, you know, he can't actually go back until he's willing to give up control and just surrender on the waves.
He has to go out on that raft. Yeah.
Like, you know, because there's times where people are like, I don't know if we're supposed to be reading. I think some people are sort of taking those as like, kind of what the movie's saying about the gods, you know, like, and I don't know if that's actually what the movie's saying.
Well, that's the problem we have with so many people are incapable of reading the difference between what characters or moments in movies say and what the actual message of a movie is, right?
Well, in the movie, Odysseus he might be feeling guilty over his employment of the Trojan horse to end that war and destroy that civilization. But it also speaks to his kind of material, technological pride and intelligence, such that he is a man who in some ways can claim that he did it himself without giving credit to the fact that the gods allowed it to happen and that they set up the scenario. And thus, it is not him himself who sacked Troy. It is, you know, the fact that it's, you know, that Athena allowed it to come in and things, those other elements in there. And so him saying God, you know, the gods help those who help themselves is almost like his line to himself that we don't need them. And the whole movie is a rebuke of that. In actuality, not only is that not true, but he is guilt-ridden because of that very approach that he's taken. And this is where it leads the through line. We're like, yeah, the Trojan horse is not technology as like a grand metaphor. There's implications there in terms of it is this tool of war, which so much technological innovation comes through war because Nolan made Oppenheimer. We know that he knows that the atom bomb led to all these other things. The atom bomb gives us nuclear power and all these other elements. You know,
Batman is always dabbling with the fact that he uses the technology, but then it's also a danger that he's going to overuse it.
Well, the whole end of Dark Knight with the surveillance versus like, yeah.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful, unethical, dangerous. You've turned every cell phone in Gotham into a microphone.
And a high-frequency generator receiver.
You took my sonar concept and applied it to every phone in the city. With half the city feeding you sonar, you can image all of Gotham. This is wrong.
No, it's that like he's threading this out, and it is the character needs to learn the lesson so that the audience learns the lesson too and comprehends the implications on our own time.
There's the didactic element.
He's extremely didactic, but he's also extremely effective. And we're getting heavy in themes. We're getting heavy in auteur stuff. I want to give a little more props to just Nolan's ability to play to an audience and really give them like a stirring story. I'll just give you a perfect example of his sensibilities and his instincts being so absolutely correct as he adds an element that is not there in the poem, which is the fact that Odysseus plucks his bow before he hunts, so that we get an audio cue for the moment when he has restrung the bow, and the first thing you do before you hear brrr. And I remember in the audience, people gasped in like in the theater with me, like, oh! And then by the time Corey Hawkins' suitor's like, he's Odysseus, there's already an arrow in his throat. No, and so it's like people are like, he understands to use the tools of cinema because it's the Chekhov's gun thing. It's like,
if you're going to string a bow in Act 1, you're going to use it later.
Exactly. But also like the sound, he also knows that like there are, we react to movies on this like guttural, instinctual level of like, if you use sound and if you use imagery and if you play to this, you can not only sweep us up in this grand narrative, you can also impart whatever thematic importance you want to convey as well. You can do both. You can really entertain us and have a meaningful lesson in the film.
It's Nolan's Hitchcockian nature of his filmmaking, where you manipulate expectation in order to generate sort of the satisfaction you want to create for the audience.
As you say, Aaron, we've been talking a lot about Nolan as a director and all these things. I want to get also some of your thoughts. Like this movie, some people have talked, if we're going to get back to the discourse, about like how this movie is almost ridiculously like packed with like performances of like famous actors, right? Like from like beginning to end, like, oh, there's the cameo of so and so and so and so and so and so. But like, let's talk a little bit about these performances, because I actually think there's some great performances.
What were some of the standouts for you guys? I've already mentioned that I think Matt Damon is actually well cast and works well.
I think Matt Damon, like honestly, this is like,
he's excellent.
A great role for Matt Damon. He's actually really good in it.
And I think he can also sell the sort of heartfelt father aspect.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I just feel like not every actor, and you know, it's no judgment on the actor, but not everyone could sell the idea that like I've been away 9 years and I've been away 20 and I really care about the kid I only saw as
exactly
a baby.
And then what about that kid?
I thought he was great. This is my like favorite Tom Holland performance.
Some people, I can't believe that some people have been I was expecting going in not loving Tom Holland, but I actually think he's really good in this.
I thought he was perfect for Telemachus.
So I'll say the performers who gave me what I was expecting, and I was very pleased with the fact that they delivered, like Robert Pattinson as Antinous. Yep. He's so slimy. He's so awesome.
He's surprised they didn't give him like that old mustache that he could twirl at times.
Twirl his mustache.
No, he claims that he based his performance off of James Woods in Casino.
Nice.
And I'm like, then you did need the little the James Woods face. No, it's
that actually makes
slime.
sense to me.
It's pure slime.
That might be awesome. I feel like most people are recognizing how good he is as the villain there.
Yeah. I expected him
to be great. But I
actually
think Tom Holland's really good.
I expected Bernthal to be great as Menelaus and to just deliver the whole speech about Troy and the world weary. I expected Anne Hathaway.
I just wanted him to be eating like a plate of spaghetti while he's
Mikey from The Bear.
Exactly. Most of what I've seen online in terms of praise of the performances, and I think they're absolutely due, are to two supporting parts. One is Samantha Morton as Cersei, who's incredible in that sequence. She might win an Oscar for like 10 minutes of screen time in it, because the speech she gives about all men, you know, go back to your disguises. It's like, because all men are pigs. It's just, and the
molding of the faces.
Molding is so weird. It's really effective. The other is John Leguizamo.
Yeah, I love John. I
also love him all the way back to Tybalt. So.
I love John Leguizamo, and I love that he gets this role because it's actually like a substantial and like beautiful role, and I actually would love him to be recognized for this because I think he's sort of like not only a moral center, he like grounds Telemachus, and he's
important in the book too. He really is.
There's so much there's so many things that people were complaining about or being like, even in the trailers that they're just like, this is going to be bad because of this. And when I saw in the trailer, I think it was on the second or third, having Argos, the dog, and it showed us an image of young Puppy and the old one. And I was like, okay, Nolan, like the dude's read this. He's read this.
You're going to kill me with that dog.
This phone.
It's so good.
But Eumaeus and Argos are so key, I think, to the emotional weight of this movie.
Yes,
absolutely. Like the faithful servant and then also
dog. And
the faithful dog. And the fact that Nolan spends enough time on it to make it like the audience is just like dying for that.
I know. Yeah. And he's like on that pile of shit. And then he's like waits for him to come, and then
he gets one pat of the head.
And he's good. And I'm like, so good.
Yeah, and then in terms of surprising performances in my mind, you've already said Tom Holland as Telemachus. I think he's quite good, and I think it especially makes sense by the way the movie sets him up as the restoration of faithful leadership as taking over as the king of Ithaca at the end, where it's like he is without blemish, and that is the point. And it's actually really interesting that one of the things that Nolan adds that I've seen nobody talk about is the sequence in Pylos, the pilgrimage sequence, the fact that they're at the Temple of Athena.
Yeah.
That's not in the poem. Why is there a pilgrimage sequence?
I love all those temple sequences are cool.
Well, also the fact that he filmed it at like actual ancient sites.
Oh, is
not
that?
saying
No.
that whole temple sequence is not like the whole temple itself is not actually existing like that, but he filmed it in Pylos, I believe, and like along this pilgrim's trail and some of the stuff sequences there like outside the caves.
Well, it
and it adds
circles
this
back
whole
on the
idea that-
violation of
Exactly.
Athena's temple that the Greeks do in Troy, right?
Exactly, but it also the fact that Telemachus is a figure who does not break these laws. He is the faithful pilgrim. It just sets it up this whole idea that he is holding true to like what the gods need.
Because Odysseus is he's the Dark Knight, right? He has to take all the sins upon himself and then leave.
Because he's the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs right now.
Yeah. The other performance is, I mean, it's obviously the most controversial one because it's the one the right just loses their mind over. But I thought Elliot Page was really good as Sinan, and like effectively used is what I'm saying. Is that it's a part that like I don't think a trans man would make sense in basically any other role, but it really works for that kind of idea of the innocent who is utilized as another weapon by Odysseus to pull off what he needs. And I think the whole sequence in Hades is just effective in general in terms of like imagery
a lot, actually.
and Agamemnon showing up and the weird uncanniness of everything.
Who played Tiresias?
Tiresias?
Yeah.
I forget the actor, but he's in a lot of different things. He's mostly a television actor, I believe. I forget the actual name.
I was going to say Agamemnon. Let's talk about Agamemnon for a minute, because
just the imagery.
Benny Safdie, like the armor is just so like.
Well, it's
like,
a performance of imagery, right? Like
exactly.
Does he even speak?
No,
a couple
just a
lines,
really.
just one or two, right?
He tells him the story of Clytemnestra killing him, and that's it.
Yeah. So I saw an interview with Benny talking about being in the armor and how it was a very interesting, like good reflection on actors and how they use like costume and things. And he was talking about how like when you're in that armor and you're meant to be like this imposing figure, you can't like just like, he's like, you can't be all floppy, right? Like you can't like just like whip your head around. And he said like even like you're going to turn to talk to someone, you turn your whole body.
It's like the first Batman outfit, right?
You want to be able to turn your head.
It is like, but it's like he said, and that's intimidating when you like, you can't just turn your head to talk to someone. You have to like, just like face them. And he's like, he's like, so it wasn't just me. It was like the costume and everything. It was a conception of Agamemnon as this like figure who is like imposing and everything. And anyway, I think he does a great job in it. But the costume is really cool with like it's almost like skull bones down the back and stuff.
And I was always wondering why it was featured so prominently in the advertising, but now I sort of get how much it looms throughout the movie. But then it becomes like, you know, it's the image of the tyrannical male authority versus like the potential of goodness of sort of like what Odysseus and then eventually Telemachus can do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. It's one is Agamemnon is a figure that actually people still kind of know, like the name, like this idea of like, you know, Agamemnon, Lord of Men, Breaker of Horses, like this, the king of kings of this age, like the absolute embodiment of
king,
the Greek king. And so he looms as like a totemic figure. This movie has a lot of totems in it, right? To speak of Nolan and Inception. You know, the horse, Agamemnon.
The lot is held in the hand.
The lot.
Oh, the thing that, yeah.
Yeah, Antinous gets Sinan.
Exchange with Sinan.
But the other is also, which people I don't think want to, the whole Bronze Age collapse being worked into this movie is so the Agamemnon's armor is of a variety, it's of a substance that after the collapse was not possible anymore. Like that's the whole concept. It's like it is this level of artistry and craftsmanship that was only possible at this height of civilization, and then it collapses, and you would not have seen that in Homer's time.
And like, you know, the movie's not going full Graham Hancock, like, you know, Ancient Apocalypse, but it has tinges of this idea that like, you know, the Bronze Age had things and technology that like there is like a dark age and civilization does decline and almost die out, and then it's sort of revived.
Yeah, largely due to drought and pillaging and basically, a hierarchical society that's built, and then warlords just pillage each other to the point of they collapse everybody simultaneously. There's, I think, who's the author, Anders, who wrote The Verge?
Patrick Wyman.
I think he has a new book on Bronze Age
does.
collapse. I listened to an interview with him, and I need to check out
Patrick
more because
Wyman,
it's fascinating.
He does the
Ties of History.
Ties of
podcast.
History, and then he has a new podcast about regular people in ancient times. Yeah.
And then obviously there's also the historian Tom Holland. No.
Yeah. Actually, I did see
the other Tom
Holland.
Holland. The other Tom Holland.
Actually,
that was
there was
funny.
a very funny interview between Tom Holland and Tom Holland, which was
No,
good,
I should seek that out. Yeah.
But the other action we haven't talked about is Anne Hathaway as Penelope. I think she's pretty key to the film too. And, I wouldn't be shocked if she gets another Oscar for this, honestly.
But all the way back to Dark Knight Rises, I don't quite understand. There's a segment of people who just hate Anne Hathaway
because she's a tryhard. That's why
she is. But I often think she's done really well at it. Yeah. No, I thought she was really good, and I thought it would be very easy, especially nowadays, to turn Penelope into kind of just like a victim, and also just someone there to kind of just gripe about things. And it's interesting the way the film portrays her. It's like, and there's an interesting exchange between Telemachus and her, where they're sort of like, it's like, what's going on here? Like with the suitors, is this about you're waiting for my dad, or are you enjoying the power that this situation has given you?
Yeah, she's like,
in a society that does not give women any power.
You think the throne's been empty? No, I've sat on it for the last 10
years. 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
But then the movie also, it doesn't let us then turn her into sort of like she's also not just like the hero. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it allows a nuance to the character. So she gets a speech like that, but at the same time, the movie sets up that it's like, Telemachus needs to be the king at the end, and she's going to go with Odysseus. People, when they're like, "Oh, this movie is just a subversion," I could easily imagine a version of this told today, where you just Penelope takes and it becomes like Queen of Ithaca. You know what I mean? And that's the ending. You're like, that's not what the characters are doing in this. And she has, I feel like, there's a richness. I also appreciate the fact that the movie is not interested in sort of subverting the fact that they've been apart so long, but they still love each other. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of people say, in literature, a lot of people love, Odysseus and Penelope as sort of, in the story, I know that Odysseus obviously sleeps with other women. He's with Calypso, but Nolan also, the way the way the movie shades that, that he's in the Lotus Eater the whole time.
The other interesting thing about all the film is to me how it draws in some of these other elements. So talking about the ending of the film, right? And the idea of him, Odysseus he returns, he, spoiler, takes his place. And then it's he wants to go into the West for his men and everything and continue adventuring. That's to me, that's got to be a reference to the Alfred Lord Tennyson poem Ulysses, right?
I think so.
Absolutely. It's riding to the West. And it's specifically the idea of, in the Tennyson poem, he
stays a while and is restless and then leaves.
Exactly. It's more of exploration. It's the idea of beyond, to the frontier, to the horizon, continue the voyage.
I think the film has a bit of that.
Yeah. But remember, it's also commenting on some past versions of Odysseus in kind of medieval era, this conceptions that he actually never went home. So it's again, it's commenting upon those. So I think it might be the Dante version that he never actually returns to Ithaca. He just actually destroys Troy and then kind of gets lost on the seas.
And that's this is the thing, so people who complain about, to circle around to this, the question of the film is an adaptation of Homer. It's it's interpreting 3,000 years of other texts and trying to add them in, right? And also bouncing it across Nolan's own films. And given all of that, I'm pretty happy with what we got.
Yeah, well,
I can't wait to see it again.
How would you craft an ending? To me, what this movie does is it does what I want in a 3-hour movie. It takes you through like an intense journey, and at the end you feel extremely satisfied by having spent that much time watching this story. You know, it's the way it, you know, sailing into the West. It's the payoff that the Lord of the Rings achieves. You know,
Yeah, they're going
Jackson's
to
trilogy
Valinor.
by actually having
Yeah, exactly.
and I think it works. And I think it would be a completely different movie. I could see a movie, but it would be a completely different movie if it had Homer's ending, which is very abrupt. And it's basically like, you know, there's a civil war in Ithaca. And then they're like, you know, they've killed a bunch of the slaves, you know, like, and then, you know, Athena basically mentions to Odysseus, you know, you're adaptable. Well, you know, we'll just sort of work things out here. And then it just sort of ends. And like, you know, that would not satisfy the blockbuster audience that this movie is pitched towards. And I think to say that that's entirely just sort of a, you know, artistic or creative weakness, I think misunderstands what's going on.
Totally.
Well, final question to you guys. Where are you at? You know, I think we've each just seen it once. We all plan to see it again because we like it that much. But where does it stand in Nolan's canon right now for you? Is this a top tier? Is this a middle of the pack? Based on what we've described, I don't think any of us are saying it's one of the lower ones.
I kind of shift with Nolan constantly,
depending on which
about
one
what's
I
my
watched.
favorites and stuff. And no, it is. And so my initial thoughts is that it's kind of like middle, I guess, partially because I think there's certain of his movies that I just, whether it's The Dark Knight or Dunkirk or Memento, I think are just kind of unimpeachable. Like they are just so good. But also, you know, every time I rewatch The Prestige, I am just absolutely
so
enamored
good.
of that movie. And I'm a huge booster of The Dark Knight Rises, even though I think it has many, for a movie that I think is both like exceptional, it does have some like kind of insane inconsistencies too.
It's also the things I kind of love about it, but I can't say it's great.
No, but that's the thing. It's like, I'll put it in my like Batman versus Superman thing where like I love this movie, but is it a true masterpiece? I'd probably rate it as one, but that's me. That's more me than the movie.
Yeah.
So my comments here is that I put it probably very similarly to like Inception or an Interstellar or a Tenet, which I like Tenet much more than most people. Like I really like Tenet. My comment about compared to all of those movies, which I will say the thing that I think, even just off one viewing, I still think the Odyssey actually does better than any of those movies. I think it's better paced than any of them. I think even though this movie is nearly 3 hours, it did not feel as long as Interstellar and Inception, which I think genuinely lag at certain moments in terms of the way that the pacing works. But Oppenheimer is something where I think he kind of cracked how to keep momentum going on a very like dry, long movie. So yeah, I'll say middle of the pack right now, but again, catch me up in 10 years, I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to know. Like, I've rewatched a lot of his films this past year with my boys, and he's so good. It's like what I think his best in shifts a little bit. Like right now I'm on the whole, like as our newsletter a few weeks ago, like that I think Interstellar is fantastic, maybe his best, but like this is like to me this is middle of the pack, maybe upper middle of the pack. I need to watch it again. I need to like figure out where it goes. But Aaron, you're absolutely right. Like it does, for a 3 hour movie, this does not drag. It went by pretty fast.
Yeah, like I think also in that newsletter. So I mentioned like The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar. I think those 3 are my personal favorites. I probably feel similar to Oppenheimer with this one. I think it's like exceptionally made. Might not be my personal favorite, but it's also seems so substantial and like significant that I'm still sort of grappling with understanding it all. And I think more and more viewings will reveal even more.
Totally.
And I think with those 2 films, he's entered in, people will describe it as sort of Oscar bait, but I don't think that's what it is. I just think he's gone to a stage where his craft has been fine-tuned enough. Like, I think it's not controversial to say that Nolan's, Oppenheimer and The Odyssey might be his best shot movies. Like, he just gets better and better at constructing shots in working with his cinematographers in a way that some of his very early movies are sometimes a bit haphazard with some of the construction. But he has his team in place. They're just all working so well together that like the technical side is so good. In both these movies, he's picked things that he clearly is trying to like say something important right now. And I think, given the fact we've talked about this for now like well over an hour, I think there's a lot there. And we sort of try to tap into a bit of what we think it's saying, but we're curious to know what you, the listener, also think.
Tell me what you remember.
A wife? A son.
And then what?
We won the war. Help me go home.
We hope you enjoyed our initial musings on the Odyssey, and I'm sure we'll have further thoughts down the road as we watch it again, and there's so much more we haven't talked about, including the score and all kinds of other things. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next month on Three Brothers Filmcast.
Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
I bid you farewell.